Every great dreamer starts with a spark, an idea, a vision, a picture of something better. Maybe it's the dream of financial freedom, of writing a book, of building a business, or of becoming someone you've always admired. But here's the truth, that most people never learn dreams on their own are not enough. They sound inspiring, they feel exciting, but until you attach a date, a plan, and a sense of accountability, your dream remains suspended in the land of someday. And someday is not a day on the calendar. You see, there's a silent graveyard where millions of dreams are buried. Dreams of inventions, songs, books, and businesses that never saw daylight. And do you know what killed them? It wasn't lack of talent or lack of passion. It was the absence of a deadline. People said, "I'll start when I have time. I'll begin when I'm ready." But time never volunteered itself, and readiness never arrived. Rohn once said, "Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment." I would add, deadlines are the structure that holds that bridge together. Without them, the bridge collapses. You can have all the enthusiasm in the world, but enthusiasm without discipline turns into frustration. A deadline is not just a date, it's a declaration. It's a promise you make to yourself that says, "This dream matters enough for me to commit." When you set a deadline, you create focus. You stop wandering. You stop living on autopilot. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, and instead, you start making moments perfect through consistent action. Think about every great achievement in history. The moon landing had a deadline. Building a company has a launch date. Students graduate because semesters end. Deadlines are what move human potential from imagination into manifestation. They are the invisible force that keeps progress alive. Let's imagine for a moment you have a dream to write a book. You've been thinking about it for years. You have ideas in your journal. Maybe even a few chapters saved on your laptop. But every time you think of finishing it, you tell yourself, "I'll do it later." Months pass, then years. Suddenly, what was once your dream has become your regret. Now imagine instead you say, "I will finish my book by June 1st. You mark it on your calendar. You break it down into steps, chapters per month, pages per week, words per day. Suddenly, you're not just dreaming. You're planning. You're measuring. You're moving. That's the power of a deadline. It gives your dream a heartbeat. A dream without a deadline is like a seed that never gets planted. You can hold it forever, but it will never grow. The soil of achievement is made of daily effort and the water of consistency. And deadlines are the sunlight. They tell you when and how long you must nurture the seed before it blossoms. But here's something most people misunderstand. Deadlines are not meant to stress you. They are meant to stretch you. When you set a date, you activate something powerful in your psychology, a sense of urgency. And urgency is what transforms potential into performance. Think about how much work people can get done the night before a deadline. Suddenly, procrastination disappears, focus sharpens, distractions fade. Why? Because the brain understands time is running out. The deadline forces clarity. It demands efficiency. It turns, "I'll try," into, "I must." Now imagine if you lived every day with that same focus, not because you're scared, but because you're committed. Imagine if you treated your dreams the same way a builder treats a blueprint, with structure, milestones, and timelines. Your results would multiply tenfold. There's a saying, "A goal is a dream with a deadline." And that's the truth. Without a deadline, Your dream is a floating cloud. With a deadline, it becomes a mountain you can climb. Let's talk about why deadlines work. First, deadlines force decisions. You stop overthinking and start doing. Perfectionism dies when time is limited. You don't have the luxury to doubt yourself endlessly. You move because you must. Second, deadlines measure progress. They allow you to look back and see how far you've come. Without a timeline, progress feels invisible, and invisibility kills motivation. Third, deadlines build momentum. Success loves speed. When you start taking consistent steps toward your dream, your confidence grows. Small wins lead to bigger victories, and soon your dream no longer feels distant. It feels inevitable. But there's another layer, a deeper reason why dreams require deadlines. Deadlines teach self-respect. When you honor your own deadlines, you send yourself a message. I keep my promises. Every time you follow through, you strengthen the muscle of self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Too many people keep promises to others, but break promises to themselves. They'll show up for everyone except their own dreams. But here's a truth worth remembering. The world will never believe in your dream if you don't first show that you do. And belief shows itself through commitment. Not talk, not intention, but follow through. A dream with a deadline changes your identity. You stop being a dreamer and become a doer. You start seeing yourself not as someone who wishes, but as someone who creates. You begin to operate on a higher level of discipline, and discipline is what separates the successful from the spectators. Think of any athlete preparing for competition. They don't say, I'll train when I feel like it. They train because the race is coming. The date is fixed. The clock is ticking. That's what drives consistency. The same principle applies to life. You perform differently when you know the clock is ticking on your dream. But let's be honest. Setting deadlines can be uncomfortable. It exposes your excuses. It forces you to confront fear. And that's exactly why it's powerful. Growth never happens inside comfort zones. When you attach a deadline to your dream, you challenge the part of you that prefers easy. You awaken the part of you that's built for greatness. Deadlines bring clarity. They separate what's urgent from what's irrelevant. They silence distractions. They make you prioritize what truly matters. If you've ever said, I don't have time, try setting a deadline. You'll be amazed at how much time you actually have once you stop wasting it on things that don't move you forward. Let's break this down into a practical truth. A dream without a deadline is like driving without a destination. You can have a full tank of gas, but if you don't know where you're going or when you'll arrive, you'll just keep circling. The deadline gives direction. It tells you, this is where I'm headed, and this is when I'll get there. Now, does that mean every deadline will be perfect? Of course not. You'll miss some. You'll adjust others. But even when you fall short, you'll be further ahead than if you never started. Progress, not perfection, is the real goal. The beauty of deadlines is that they make you learn faster. You gain feedback. You realize what works and what doesn't. You evolve. Every deadline you meet builds your momentum. Every one you miss builds your wisdom. Let's take an example from everyday life. Think of students who have exams. Without a fixed exam date, how many would study months in advance? Few. But the moment the date is announced, everything changes. Suddenly, they plan, prepare, and perform. Why? Because the deadline creates structure. In your life, you can do the same. Set your own exam dates. not for school, but for success. Test yourself. Give yourself targets. Say, by the end of this month, I will learn this skill. By this date, I'll save this amount. By this deadline, I'll launch this project. Your future self will thank you, because every deadline met today becomes freedom tomorrow. There's another hidden gift in deadlines. They protect your time. When you set a clear deadline, you learn to say no. No to distractions. No to unnecessary commitments. No to anything that doesn't align with your goal. Deadlines create boundaries, and boundaries create balance. So, how do you start? Step 1, write down your dream clearly. Not vaguely, clearly. Step 2, set a specific date. Not someday, but this day. Step 3, break the dream into measurable steps. Step 4, hold yourself accountable, or find someone who will. And step 5, stay flexible. The date can shift, but the direction should never fade. Every step you take toward your deadline is a statement that says, I believe in my future. Remember, a dream with no date is just a story you tell yourself, but a dream with a deadline becomes a schedule, a mission, a movement, a measurable path. Time is the most democratic resource we have. Everyone gets 24 hours a day. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't lies in how they use those hours. The successful don't wait for inspiration. They create systems. And deadlines are systems of success. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent. And consistency thrives when you have clear time frames. So, as you listen to this message, ask yourself, what dream have I delayed because I haven't set a date? What promise to myself have I postponed because I said, maybe later? Take that dream and give it a deadline. Write it down. Say it out loud. Commit to it. Then start. Even if it's small, start. Because starting with intention is how miracles begin. Remember, the clock is not your enemy. It's your ally. It's reminding you that life is short, but possibilities are infinite. If only you give them a schedule. When you wake up each morning knowing your dream has a deadline, you live differently. You walk with purpose. You act with clarity. You feel momentum, because you know that every sunrise brings you closer to something real, something you once only imagined. So, stop waiting for someday. Start working for this day. The moment you set a deadline, your dream stops being a fantasy and starts being a future. Let me leave you with this truth. Dreams are born in your imagination, but they grow in your calendar. They begin with vision, but they live through commitment. And the only way to make them real is to give them a date. Because when you give your dream a deadline, you give your destiny a direction. Dreams without deadlines are only wishes. The difference between fantasy and achievement lies in action and accountability. The first key to this speech is understanding that a dream without a timeline is a directionless desire. Beautiful, yes, but powerless. You see, every human being has the ability to dream. From a young age, we imagine what life could be, the places we'll go, the success we'll achieve, the life we'll create. Dreaming is the first spark of progress, the birthplace of every invention, every movement, every breakthrough. But here's the hard truth: a dream alone, no matter how vivid or inspiring, doesn't have the strength to lift itself off the ground. Without structure, it floats like a balloon. Lovely to look at, but easily blown away by the winds of distraction, fear, and delay. A dream without a deadline is like setting sail on a vast ocean without a compass. You may have the best ship, the finest crew, and the deepest desire to reach new lands. But without direction, you'll drift endlessly. The ocean will move you, but you won't know where you're going. Days will turn into weeks, and weeks into years, until you realize you've been moving, but not arriving. That's what happens to countless people. They dream of success, of health, of happiness. But because they never define when or how they will act, their dreams remain trapped in the realm of imagination. They keep saying, "One day, I'll start that business. Someday, I'll write that book. Soon, I'll get in shape." But one day, someday, and soon are silent killers of destiny. They sound comforting. They let you believe you're planning. But in reality, they are just delays disguised as intentions. Dreams need boundaries to grow. Think of it this way: a river without banks becomes a flood. It loses power, purpose, and direction. But when that same water flows within clear boundaries, it gains force. It carves valleys, turns turbines, and creates life. The deadline is the bank that gives your dream power. It channels your energy and focus in a single direction so that your dream doesn't just exist. It advances. Without a timeline, even the strongest desire turns into frustration. Because when there's no target, there's no measure of progress. You might be working hard, but at what? Toward when? Without clarity of time, even effort feels empty. And that's why so many people lose motivation. Not because they lack ambition, but because their ambition has no timeline to grow against. Here's something profound. A timeline gives your dream accountability. When you attach a date to a goal, you make it real. You move it from your imagination to your calendar. You give it a space in your life. That's when your dream stops being a fantasy and starts becoming a responsibility. Your responsibility. Think about it. When something has a deadline, you treat it differently. If your boss gives you a project with no due date, you'll probably start it later. But if they say, "This must be done by Friday," suddenly your energy shifts. You plan, you focus, and you act. The same principle applies to your dreams. Without a timeline, you unconsciously give yourself permission to delay. But once you set a date, your mind begins to organize around it. A timeline also eliminates the illusion of plenty of time. Many people assume they'll always have more time, that next year will be easier, that motivation will somehow appear later. But life doesn't wait. Every day you delay is a day lost, a piece of potential wasted. Setting a deadline reminds you that time is not infinite, it's precious. And when you treat it that way, you start living with purpose. Now, does this mean deadlines make the journey harder? Not necessarily. In fact, they make it clearer. When you know where you want to be, and when you want to get there, every decision becomes easier. You can ask yourself, does this move me closer to my goal, or does it pull me further away? That single question, repeated daily, has the power to reshape your entire life. The difference between those who dream and those who achieve isn't intelligence, luck, or even talent. It's structure. Successful people don't just wish, they plan. They put their dreams on a timeline. They commit to specific actions, and they hold themselves accountable. They understand that direction gives meaning to desire. Let's illustrate this with an example. Imagine two people both want to run a marathon. The first says, "I want to run a marathon someday." The second says, "I will run the Boston Marathon next April." The difference is night and day. The first person might buy running shoes and talk about training. But without a date, there's no urgency, no reason to act today instead of tomorrow. The second person, however, has no room for delay. They'll research a training plan, adjust their diet, track their miles, and make progress because their dream has a timeline. That's how achievement works. When you define when, you automatically define what and how. A clear deadline creates clarity of process. It turns vague desire into measurable action. Now, you might wonder, what if I set a deadline and miss it? That's okay. The goal of setting a deadline isn't perfection. It's progression. Even if you fall short, you'll still be closer to your dream than if you never started. Progress beats hesitation every time. The real danger isn't missing a deadline. It's never setting one. Because without a deadline, your dream has no pulse, no momentum, no urgency. It just floats, alive in thought but dead in action. So understand this deeply. A dream without a timeline is a directionless desire. It might inspire you for a moment, but it won't move you for a lifetime. Direction gives purpose to effort. A timeline gives life to a dream. Beautiful but powerless. That's what dreams remain without direction. They inspire you for a moment. They make your heart race with possibility, but without movement, they fade like morning mist. And that leads us to the second key. Understanding that deadlines create urgency, discipline, and measurable progress. They are not just tools of organization. They are the engines of achievement. Deadlines transform intentions into plans, and plans into action. They turn the invisible into visible, and they make the impossible achievable. Let's be honest. Most people have good intentions. They intend to start eating healthy, to begin saving money, to build a business, to improve their life. But intentions without timelines are like arrows without targets. They might leave the bow, but they'll never hit anything. A deadline gives direction to your aim. It says, this is the goal. This is when it must be done. This is how I will measure my progress. Deadlines are the difference between wandering and winning. When you give your dream a date, you also give yourself a reason to act now. Urgency awakens focus. It silences the noise of procrastination and forces your energy toward what matters most. Without a sense of urgency, the mind drifts into comfort. You say, I have time, and time becomes your excuse. But with a deadline, you say, I must, and must becomes your motivation. You've seen it happen. The night before an exam, the final hours of a project, the last days before a big presentation. Suddenly, your productivity skyrockets. Distractions disappear. Your mind becomes laser sharp. That's not coincidence. That's urgency. Deadlines trigger a natural focus response in the brain. They remind you that time is limited, and limited time forces clarity. Imagine if you could harness that same focus not in panic, but with purpose. That's what true discipline is. Consistent urgency without chaos. Deadlines also build discipline. The rarest and most valuable skill in personal growth. Because discipline isn't just about doing things when you feel like it. It's about doing them when you don't. A deadline holds you accountable, even when motivation fades. Motivation may start the journey, but discipline finishes it. And deadlines are what keep that discipline alive. When you attach a timeline to your goal, you stop asking, should I do this today? And start saying, this must be done today. That shift, from optional to non-negotiable, is what changes everything. Greatness doesn't come from inspiration alone. It comes from consistency, from the daily, disciplined steps toward a clear finish line. And then comes measurable progress. This is where dreams become tangible. Without a deadline, progress is invisible, You don't know if you're moving forward or standing still. But with a deadline, you can track your journey. You can measure what's been done and what remains. Each small win becomes proof that your dream is possible. Every milestone builds momentum, and momentum is what keeps you moving when excitement fades. Let's take a practical example. Suppose your dream is to learn a new skill. Let's say you want to become fluent in a new language. Without a deadline, you might study whenever you have time. Weeks pass and your progress is minimal. But if you decide, be December 31st, I will hold a full conversation in this language. Everything changes. You plan your weeks, measure your vocabulary, track your fluency. Every day has purpose. The dream no longer floats in someday. It now lives in this day. That's the power of measurable progress. Deadlines turn big dreams into smaller, achievable steps. They break the mountain into climbable paths. You stop feeling overwhelmed and start feeling organized. Because when you can measure your progress, you can manage your progress. And what you can manage, you can master. But now, let's move deeper into the third key. The heart of this message, understanding that the true purpose of setting deadlines is not pressure, but growth. Many people fear deadlines because they associate them with stress, anxiety, and pressure. But that's only true when deadlines are imposed externally, without passion or purpose. When you set your own deadlines, driven by your dreams, they become not burdens, but blessings. The goal of a deadline isn't to suffocate you, it's to stretch you. It's to pull you beyond your comfort zone and show you what you're truly capable of. Growth never happens in comfort. Comfort breeds stagnation, but deadlines create movement. When you set a date for your dream, you give yourself a reason to evolve faster, to think sharper, to act braver. Imagine a seed buried in soil. Without pressure, it will never break open. But under the right pressure, with the right conditions, it transforms. It grows roots. It reaches for light. That's exactly what deadlines do for you. They apply the right amount of pressure, not to break you, but to break open your potential. When you set a deadline, you invite growth into your life. You learn to plan, to prioritize, to persevere. You discover that you can handle more than you thought. You learn the difference between business and productivity, between waiting and working, between dreaming and doing. Yes, the process may feel uncomfortable at first. You'll face resistance from your own doubts, fears, and excuses. But that resistance is not punishment. It's proof that growth is happening. Every time you meet a deadline, you prove to yourself that you're capable of more. You build resilience. You strengthen your confidence. You develop habits that will serve you for a lifetime. You begin to see that deadlines are not chains that confine you. They're ladders that elevate you. Each rung represents a step forward, one goal met, one lesson learned, one level achieved. Setting deadlines transforms your relationship with time. Instead of feeling like time is slipping away, you start mastering it. You stop saying, "I wish I had more time," and start saying, "I will make the most of the time I have." That's growth. Mental, emotional, and spiritual. The truth is, every great achiever uses deadlines as mirrors of growth. A writer with a manuscript deadline grows in creativity and discipline. An athlete with a race date grows in endurance and mental strength. An entrepreneur with a launch date grows in courage, focus, and adaptability. Every deadline becomes a tool for transformation. So, don't fear deadlines. Embrace them. They are not meant to crush your spirit, but to carve your character. They bring structure to your chaos, clarity to your confusion, and momentum to your mission. They make you stronger, sharper, and more intentional. When you begin to see deadlines not as pressure, but as opportunities to grow, you step into a new level of maturity. You stop running from responsibility and start running toward greatness. Because every deadline met is a declaration that you've become a little better than you were yesterday. Remember, deadlines are not about rushing. They're about rising. They're about becoming the kind of person who keeps promises, who turns vision into victory, who honors commitment with consistency. They are not there to scare you into action. They are there to sculpt you into someone capable of sustaining success. And that's the beauty of it all. When you use deadlines the right way, you don't just reach your dream. You grow into the kind of person who can handle the dream once it arrives. Because when you give your dream a date, you give your potential a chance to meet it. Think about that for a moment. A dream by itself lives in the future. It's a picture of what could be. Your potential, on the other hand, lives inside you, waiting for a reason to rise, a reason to act, a reason to stretch beyond the familiar. And when you set a date, when you say, "But this time, I will achieve this goal," you create a bridge between those two worlds, the world of imagination and the world of execution. That bridge is where transformation happens. Setting a date is not a small act. It is a declaration of faith. Faith in your ability. Faith in your vision. Faith that the effort you put in will be worth it. When you give your dream a date, you are saying to yourself and to the universe, "I am ready to bring this to life." That single act turns invisible hope into visible commitment. It changes "I wish" into "I will." Your potential is like a muscle. It doesn't grow by thinking. It grows by being challenged. But potential needs a reason to come alive. When you give your dream a date, you give your potential a deadline to awaken. Suddenly, your mind begins to plan, your body begins to prepare, and your spirit begins to align. You activate parts of yourself that were dormant, waiting for a call to action. That call is your commitment to time. Without a date, your dream stays in the clouds. But the moment you assign it a day, a month, a year, it starts to take shape. The fog clears, and your path begins to appear. The date becomes a destination, and your potential becomes the traveler ready to embark on the journey. For example, imagine someone says, "I want to be fit." That's a dream, but it's vague, endless, and undefined. Now, if they say, "I will lose 10 pounds by the end of this year," everything changes. Their brain begins to compute what must be done, what habits to change, what routines to adopt, what sacrifices to make. Suddenly, the dream becomes measurable, and their potential steps forward to meet the challenge. That's what happens every time you set a timeline. You invite your hidden strength to step into the spotlight. You give your mind something to focus on, your body something to move toward, and your spirit something to believe in. Here's a truth few realize: potential is not discovered, it is developed. You don't find your potential by thinking about what you can do. You find it by demanding more of yourself than you ever have before. And deadlines are the demands that awaken dormant greatness. When you say, "I will do this by this time," you light a fire inside you. You stop wandering and start working. You stop hoping and start building. You stop dreaming in generalities and start achieving in specifics. There's something magical that happens when you commit to a date. It's as if your entire being begins to reorganize itself around that commitment. Your focus sharpens. Your priorities shift. The things that used to distract you begin to fade. And the things that matter most rise to the top. That's your potential responding to the call of your dream. Even the universe begins to conspire with those who commit. When you give your dream a date, opportunities start showing up, not because they suddenly appeared, but because you started seeing them. You became alert. You began to notice doors that were always there, but hidden by indecision. Commitment opens your eyes, and deadlines open your path. And let's not forget, setting a date gives you something rare and powerful. Momentum. The countdown begins. Every day becomes a step closer. Every action, no matter how small, feels significant because it contributes to something real, something measurable. Without a date, there is no countdown. And without a countdown, there's no urgency. You end up waiting for the right time. But the right time never announces itself. Setting a date creates the right time. It forces you to act, to prepare, to move. And here's the deeper beauty. When you give your dream a date, you don't just move toward your potential. Your potential begins moving toward you. You start attracting the knowledge, the skills, and the experiences necessary to fulfill that dream. It's like the moment you decide with full conviction, life starts whispering, "All right, let's make this happen." Your potential is limitless, but it requires direction. Without a target, even the strongest arrow loses purpose. A date gives your effort direction, and direction transforms potential into performance. Think about every great achievement in history. From landing on the moon to inventing revolutionary technologies. Each started as a dream. But what made them reality wasn't just vision, it was a date. When President John F. Kennedy declared, "Would choose to go to the moon before the decade is out," he didn't just inspire. He gave a dream a deadline. That date turned imagination into mission, and mission into history. That's what happens when you commit. Your potential stops sleeping. It starts calculating, strategizing, building, adjusting. It rises to meet the level of your expectation. So, if you've ever doubted your ability, if you've ever told yourself you're not ready, remember this. You don't have to be ready. You just have to be scheduled. Because readiness doesn't come before action. It grows through action. When you give your dream a date, you are not only setting a goal, you are sending an invitation to your best self. You are saying, "Meet me here, on this date, at this destination, as the person I am becoming." And when that day arrives, whether you've fully achieved the dream or are still on the path, you will have met a new version of yourself, wiser, stronger, more disciplined, more courageous. Because deadlines don't just measure time, they measure transformation. The dream is the goal, but the deadline is the growth.